Welcome to a special edition of CPAC Now, America UnCanceled, where we're in this effort to reclaim our schools and protect our children.
And so we have two very special guests joining us. I got to tell you, two brave warriors who are speaking out against the radical transgender policies that they're pushing in our schools. We've got Tanner Cross, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with him. He is the brave Loudoun County elementary teacher who spoke up against the transgender policy in the school system. In addition, with him, joining him is Tyson Langhofer. He is the attorney for Alliance Defense Freedom. Tanner, Tyson, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks for having us on. We appreciate it.
So before we get started, I really want our viewers to see the moment when you were speaking at the school board meeting. So let's play that now so that our viewers can really understand, I think, your passionate speech on this issue.
My name is Tanner Cross, and I'm speaking out of love for those who suffer with gender dysphoria. 60 Minutes this past Sunday interviewed over 30 young people who transitioned, but they felt led astray because lack of pushback or how easy it was to make physical changes to their bodies in just 3 months. They are now detransitioning. It's not my intention to hurt anyone, but there are certain truths that we must face when ready. We condemn school policies like 80-40 and 80-35 because it will damage children, defile the holy image of God. I love all of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
Tanner, that was such a brave moment. Walk us through what is happening in terms of the lawsuit, and why did you say, I need to stand up against these radical policies in our school system?
I saw on the school website that our school board was going to, they were going to vote on two proposed policies that I believe are going to be harmful to students and teachers because it was going to force teachers to say things that are untrue. Because I did that at the school board meeting, I was suspended and I was told that I was being placed on administrative leave. So when I got put on administrative leave, I contacted ADF, and ADF drew up a letter, and we asked for my job back at Loudoun County Public Schools, and they doubled down and said no.
The school said no. And Tyson, just, why did you think, this is obviously a religious liberties case, a First Amendment case. What are you all basing this lawsuit on?
Well, the Virginia Constitution, along with the First Amendment, make it very clear that the government can't punish school teachers simply because others disagree with their viewpoint. But that's exactly what happened here. Tanner spoke at a public meeting where the school board invited comment on proposed policies. And Tanner simply spoke his views. He went to school the next day, had no problems teaching his class, but yet because 5 parents disagreed with Tanner's viewpoints on an important debate going on in our society, they said that they were justified in punishing Tanner by placing him on leave. That's unconstitutional. And frankly, it's contrary to the mission of a public school, which is designed to give various viewpoints to our students so they can evaluate, the various issues that are going on in our society.
Is it ironic that you have to go and defend Tanner's constitutional rights, his First Amendment rights, within the milieu of a school system that actually isn't even teaching the Constitution in its proper terms anymore?
Well, it's not only ironic, but it's very sad, Matt, when you really think about this. These administrators and teachers are supposed to be modeling these principles that America is founded upon. They're supposed to be not only teaching them, but modeling the principles. And instead, Loudoun County is trying to shut down an important debate before it even begins by sending a message to all their teachers. If you speak out, if you disagree with our position, you are going to be terminated. And that sends a message not only to the teachers, but to the students that the First Amendment doesn't mean what it says. And that's a very dangerous and bad message to be sending to our students.
Tanner, you stepped out into the public eye, right? You know, you've really become a national figure in the sense of, you know, people are watching what's happening here. What's the backlash? Like, I know this is so difficult. It could be so difficult for you and your family. What have you experienced so far?
What I've experienced actually was a lot of love. On one side, I had a lot of coworkers, a lot of friends. My church community really came through for me and went to bat for me, supported what I did, just speaking truth. You know, and then there's some folks that disagree with me, and that's okay. This is America; they're allowed to do that, and I support them to disagree with me. That's okay. But at the end of the day, I think that all of us agree that a teacher should go to a school board meeting where, you know, the public is asked to come to. Voice their opinions and concerns about education and not be punished for that. That's just unconstitutional.
Whatever happened, Tanner, to this idea that, you know, let's say you have 20, 30 kids in a class. They come from all different, maybe socioeconomic backgrounds, different personal struggles. You know, there was an idea where a child's struggle was more of a personal struggle and there would be a relationship with the teacher and dealing with that. When did we switch to this idea that teachers must indoctrinate all children to accept things like the fact that their gender will be fluid, might want to be one of 12, 20, 56, 62 genders, and the teacher now has to spout this unscientific, you know, gobbledygook from the head of the class. When did this transition? Is this in the last couple of years? Has this been coming for a long time? What is going on?
I'm glad you brought that up, Matt. In the fall, a friend of mine sent me to those proposed policies that I was speaking about at the school board meeting that I was opposing. I was you know, I was just doing my research kind of the whole school year, like, where is this coming from? You know, what does it look like when it's on my doorstep? And to answer your question, you know, in the last school year, it really started to convict me and started to make me wonder, you know, how I'm glad, like I said, like, I'm glad that you brought that up about my students. How am I going to present myself in front of my students, these 20, 30, even 60, if there's 2 classes in there, and they're, the school board or the state of Virginia wants me to say things that are untrue to students and be a poor example, and just put faith just for aside, because my faith does drive me every single day in and out of school. But, you know, it would be a poor example, like I said, putting my faith aside, just biological facts to all my students. It's like you said, I serve a very diverse community, and I would be setting a bad example if I just wasn't, you know, demonstrating that there's only.
Yeah, but they're not, Tanner. What seems to me where they've really jumped the tracks here is they're not telling you that you have to accept the children in your class, even if they have questions about their gender and stuff, which it sounds like you're a compassionate and tolerant person. That's not what they're making you say things to the class as the teacher that you know to be harmful to those kids and scientifically questionable at the best. When did that start to happen? It's one thing if you know about kids and you're trying to deal with their backgrounds. It's another thing when the teacher has to parrot these policies that they have clear religious problems with.
Yeah. Again, this I was notified about, you know, this past school year in the fall, and I didn't have any experiences yet with a student that identified with the opposite sex or wanted to be called a gender pronoun of what they weren't biologically, you know, made in. That being said, you know, this policy that I was opposing, Matt, also is going to force students to affirm that a biological male could be female. Like I said, these are proposed policies. We're hoping and praying and pleading that, you know, the school board, you know, hears teachers and hears the community, but it doesn't look like it's going there.
Matt, what's pretty clear to answer your question is that these policies are being driven by outside interests. This is not demand
Right.
inside Loudoun County. This is outside interests. You're seeing this across the nation. School boards are being inundated with these proposed policies, which are coming in from very ideologically, driven organizations who have an agenda, who are trying to change the things that are being taught to our children. And they're push these very divisive ideologies and forcing students and teachers to say things that they disagree with. And
So what you're really saying is, in Loudoun County and in some of these other counties, you really couldn't be a person of faith and be a teacher. They're going to make it almost impossible for any teachers in these public schools to be people of faith.
Well, you're absolutely right, Matt. In fact, in our hearing on the injunction, the judge actually asked Loudoun County's attorney, he said, "Are you saying that you cannot be a Christian and be a public school teacher?" Because he recognized that. And the answer was very interesting. She said essentially something like, "Well, there's no policy against it."
Yeah, but it puts the people of faith in such a difficult situation. And, I want to get a sense, Tyson, from you. What is the timeline in terms of the lawsuit? So we know the school board, they ended up appealing the case to the Virginia Supreme Court. What does it look like? What's the time frame on this?
Yeah, so thankfully the judge agreed with us and entered an order and reinstated Tanner. But they did appeal that order to the Virginia Supreme Court. So we're waiting for the Virginia Supreme Court to rule on their appeal on the injunction. But while that appeal is pending, the case in the trial court is still moving forward. Thankfully, the court has agreed to move it along quickly. And so we're scheduled to go to trial September 7th and 8th on the ultimate determination whether the school violated Tanner's constitutional rights by suspending him.
Well, we wish you all luck in this lawsuit, what the country's going through,
right,
and all these fights. We just recently had a CPAC in Dallas, and we featured a lot of other grassroots heroes like yourself, Tanner, who are just speaking. You feel compelled to speak because there's so much insanity around you. And what's your message? We reach a pretty big audience with this show, and there's a lot of parents and a lot of teachers who are very, very obviously worried about losing their jobs. They're obviously worried about being ostracized in their communities for speaking up. What's your advice to those folks that are afraid that they will be canceled by speaking the truth?
My advice to them, Matt, would be if you love your students and if you love your kids, which I know all teachers and parents love their kids, then, to be assertive and use their First Amendment rights, not worried about consequences, just going to school board meetings, writing letters and emails, and lovingly and respectfully, challenging their schools, policies that are very harmful to students and their children.
And Matt, I'll just add, Tanner said three things. He said, "I love all my students. I don't want to lie to them. And I don't want to call a boy a girl." The vast majority of Americans agree with that message. And the only reason it was courageous for Tanner to speak that was because too few people do it. So if all of us who believe that are willing to speak that message and to stand up for those values and to demonstrate that that's what's best for children, then it won't take so much courage for the next person. So that's why Tanner spoke out.
Well, I got to tell you, we cannot cower in these times. Our world is facing a lot of chaos, and our nation is in a very, very difficult situation. So we need more heroes like Tanner, and we need more heroes like you, Tyson, because we need to make sure that our religious liberties are defended and protected. As we know, the left is spending a lot of time trying to strip those from our lives. So I want to thank you both for joining us. Tanner, you are an incredible example for all of us to continue to speak up and be bold, and don't let these radical policies overtake our schools and overtake our nation. We want to thank you both for being here with us today on CPAC Now.
Thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
We just want to now toss over to the CPAC panel. We actually had this discussion It was not only on the transgender policies that they're trying to implement in our schools, but also the critical race theory. That panel was exceptional.
Awesome.
It was head of the class, was called Head of the Class. Why is the left committed to critical race theory when so many parents disagree? I think one of the top-notch speakers on that panel, there was so many of them, including Ian Pryor, who's fightforourschools.com, was Chi Van Fleet. She's a mom.
Yeah,
she
she's
spoke
fabulous.
about how critical race theory is destroying our schools and really compared that to what she saw in the Chinese communist regime when she lived there as a child. So let's play that panel right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Head of the Class. Why is the left committed to CRT when so many parents disagree? Please welcome your panel, activist Chi Van Fleet. From FlightForSchools.com, Ian Pryor. From CISD School Board, Hannah Smith. And your moderator, American Conservative Union Foundation's Heather Flick.
Hi, CPAC Sunday. This is a panel of warriors. Attorney Ian Pryor is a former senior official at the Trump Department of Justice. He's CEO of Headwaters Media, and he's the executive director of FightForSchools.com, which you'll hear a lot more about in this panel. Hannah Smith is a religious liberty attorney. She clerks for both Justices Thomas and Alito. In addition to that, she's the mother of 4, and she was recently elected to a Dallas area school board with over 70% of the vote. Parents are paying attention, clearly, especially in Texas. Chi Van Fleet didn't want to become an activist, but she recognized CRT from her own experience as a student during China's Cultural Revolution. She's committed now to help Americans see what's happening in their own classrooms by sharing her own experiences that I think a lot of children aren't even taught about these days, the Cultural Revolution. So we look forward to hearing from Chi. Chi, I'm going to start for you. What's the left strategy with CRT? What was your own experience? Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like being a student in China during the Cultural Revolution?
Yes. We all know what CRT is. I'm here to introduce its twin brother. It's called CCT, and that's Mao's class conflict theory. They use the same strategy, is to divide people into opposing groups. One is oppressor, one is oppressed. And they share the same ancestor. That is the guy called Karl Marx. And both of them disguise themselves as something they are really not. CRT presented itself as an advocate for racial justice, CCT as the liberator of the oppressed from the oppression of feudalism, capitalism, and imperialism. One of the remarkable similarities between these two is CCT believes that you are guilty at birth. If you are born to parents who are categorized as the class enemy, you are too at birth. And CRT believes that if you're born white, you are inherently a racist, and you have white privilege no matter how poor you are. And both of them have the same goal, that is to divide, conquer, and control people. And what is cancel culture? Cancel culture is to cancel the culture of the oppressed. During the Cultural Revolution, we were instructed to destroy 4 old things: old thoughts, old tradition, old custom, and old habit. That is Chinese civilization. And they canceled it and replaced from something from the West, cultural Marxism. And what CRT is aiming at is to destroy the system. They call it systemic racism, institutional racism, and structural racism. What they are aiming at is to destroy the foundation of this country, that is the Western civilization, Christianity, and our Constitution.
You're exactly right. And I just want to add, can you imagine? Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so inspirational to hear her talk because she's lived through this in China. Can you imagine the trauma that we're inflicting on our school-aged kids when we teach them that just because you're born white means that you are inherently a racist and that you're inherently an oppressor? You know, critical race theory takes its origin from critical theory. And critical theory is really a rejection of the Enlightenment. It's a rejection of reason. Critical theory says that we look through everything through the lens of power. Who are the oppressors and who are the oppressed? Well, critical race theory was born here in the United States in the 1970s at Harvard Law School. And critical race theory says that we look at race as the key factor in every human relationship. So if you are white, you're inherently an oppressor. If you are a person of color, you are inherently oppressed. Can you imagine the psychological trauma that we're inflicting on our school-aged kids by telling them they're inherently bad if they're born white, or if they're born a person of color, they're inherently a victim? That's exactly why we stood up and fought against critical race theory in our schools.
So this is a movement. She has tied it into what the communists in China did during the Cultural Revolution. We know this has been going on in America for a while. Ian, what are the other tie-ins here? We know that it's becoming an industry too, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's not just a movement,
it's
actually a business.
It's an $8 billion industry. And you know what happens is you'll get these schools and they'll bring in these equity consultants to come in and basically find the racism. And it's like bringing your car to the shop. I mean, who brings their car to the shop and leaves without getting, you know, oh, you gotta get your tires rotated, you gotta get your fluid changed, you gotta do this. Of course they're gonna find it. So, you know, I first learned about this in Loudoun County Public Schools when, you know, I attended a virtual school board and they talked about all of this this equity assessment that they did. And I wondered, how much did they pay for that? So I decided to FOIA the documents, the contract, the bills, and I found out that they paid $500,000 to this equity collaborative in 2019. Turns out they're still on contract for $625 an hour. And what kind of things are they doing? They're doing things like anonymous reporting portals. So in Loudoun County Public Schools, there's now an anonymous bias portal where students and parents can anonymously report other students for incidents of bias. And then you click through and it's, you know, some of the things are legitimate, but other things are not being inclusive. And then what do they do with that information? They give it to the equity office and then the equity ambassadors who get to have these discussions about students who have been anonymously reported and have no idea about that. So how could that go wrong in high school, where you can make anonymous reports on your friends for just about anything you want to do? There's no abuse potential in that one.
Well, and there's serious due process concerns with that as well. I mean, are kids getting their rights protected in that process?
So there's a huge industry of people who are making money off getting kids to hate themselves, hate their parents, hate their country, nationalize the education system.
Well, that's right. And the reason why we have local school boards is because we want the community to decide what values it wants its children to be learning in schools, right? That's why we elect people to represent our values on the school board. But these DEI audits, they come in and they try and nationalize our curriculum by making every school look exactly like every other school. And that's not what our federalist system contemplated when we set up local school boards.
CRT is getting such traction now in the media that now its proponents have shifted the way they've been marketing it, and now they're saying that we're making everything up. There is no CRT, right? This is all a boogeyman that we have made, the parents have made up to be able to get new laws passed in states to take over school boards, et cetera. It is real. You've all seen it. How do parents identify it? How do we counter the new message that this is just a figment of everybody's imagination?
Well, you know, I think that the key phrases they will use, they'll say equity, culturally responsive learning. Those are really the two big phrases that they like to use. Now, equity is not equality. Equity is equal results. So we're gonna tinker with policies to make sure that everybody ends up in the same place. It's anti-meritocracy, it's anti-liberalism.
It's anti-equality for all,
Exactly.
right? It's
to a
anti-equality of
10-year-old
opportunity. It rejects equality of opportunity for equity of results.
But to a 10-year-old, the word equity sounds a lot like equality. I mean, it's very confusing and it's very deliberate from what we right?
I just want to say that everything that is happening in our school and in our country, I mean everything, happened during the Cultural Revolution. And during the Cultural Revolution, the students, and it's very important to know that the Cultural Revolution started in school, started in college, campus, and spread to all over the country. And that's what we see here too. And everything like teaching the fake history. Here we teach 1619 in China. The 3,000 years Chinese history was reduced to class struggle between the oppressed and oppressor. And we banned books. We banned the whole Chinese classic literature. And here we start to see that. Tom Sawyer and Dr. Seuss are banned.
So I'll just give you a few more buzzwords that you can look for if you're trying to figure out if CRT is being backdoored into your school curriculum. So look for equity, as Ian said. Look for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look for social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is now the equity lever in our schools. So social emotional learning started off as teaching kids about emotional resilience, how to have good behavior in class, but now it's turning into teaching kids how to realize their full self-identity. And that identity analysis looks at bias, implicit bias, all of those buzzwords, those are CRT. So look for culturally responsive teaching, look for cultural competence, cultural proficiency, look for white supremacy, white fragility, white bias, implicit bias. All of these terms are buzzwords that have their roots in critical race theory.
And keep an eye on the children too, right? I mean, I know parents whose children come home now and are depressed and look at their mother and they say, my teacher told me I'm a bad person and you're a bad person and that we shouldn't have what we have and just because you work hard, you're privileged that you got there to begin with. Parents need to talk to their children and really look for changes in attitude and behavior too, right? Because part of this is really to take down their self-esteem.
Well, that's exactly right. And, I think critical race theory applied even out of the schools in the community when we're having these conversations. And this is really how I got involved in this. I've been a lawyer for 10 years. I've been in politics for the 10 years after that. I wrote an article about critical race theory in Loudoun County Public Schools in October of last year. And then in March, there was a private Facebook group that included 6 of our school board members and a bunch of radical leftist activists. And what they did was they decided to plot against parents that were speaking out against critical race theory. They wanted to infiltrate our groups, publicly expose us, hack our websites, and raise money to do it. And I've said this before, that was my Liam Neeson moment, where I said, I have a particular set of skills that I've acquired over a long career, skills that make me a nightmare for people like you.
But I just want to say that you don't have to have skills like Ian to get involved in this fight. We had an amazing community that was behind us that did all sorts of things. Open records requests. Learn how to use your state's open records laws. Ask the school district for information through open records requests. And that will arm you with facts that you can then use when you show up to give public comments at your school board meetings. Organize beforehand. Get your army together. Talk about who's going to talk about which topic. Draft talking points for them. Get everybody mobilized so they show up at the school board meetings and articulate the reason why CRT is so bad. Set up a Facebook group for your community so that you can educate each other, so that you can learn more and you can arm yourself with those facts to fight back. And also, we set up a political action committee in our town, and the PAC was really very influential in helping getting people organized into different committees a legal committee, a communications committee, a grassroots neighborhood committee, a prayer team. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can get your community organized, but you have to have a strategic focus so that you can fight back.
Well, and that's the you know, kind of where I was going with that too, which is everyone here has a particular set of skills. Everyone in your community has a particular set of skills. We've got somebody, we call her the FOIA queen, okay? And she FOIAs everything. Like all day, she's out there FOIAing things. We have people that, you know, just know who to talk to get folks to go door to door. We have another guy who just can read through all this stuff, break it down, put it all into a one-pager so that people can understand. There's everybody in your community that has those particular set of skills that you can use, that they can use to set up these kind of political action committees, to set up organizations, to really, because you're gonna need that. You're gonna need a team, you're gonna need a command staff, you're gonna need what I call the army of moms. And I've got an army of moms, and we've got an army of moms in Loudoun County that are literally out there all day, every day, fighting back against this school board.
I want to hear, because you gave a wonderful speech that sort of is what set you on this path, and it was something that you were compelled to do because of your concern for what was going on. There are a lot of people out there who think, I don't want to become a target, I don't want people to know who I am. Once you get out there and speak, you see how many other people appreciate you doing that and feel more motivated themselves to get involved because they can stand with people like you.
I just want to say that we won the Cold War, but we definitely did not defeat the communism. The communism is not only here in America, its infiltration is complete, especially in the educational system. Any Chinese that experienced the Cultural Revolution or had knowledge of Cultural Revolution can easily see what's happening here. It's a repeat. But sadly, too many Americans don't recognize it. They see the symptoms, they don't know what the disease. The disease is communism, is cultural Marxism. And that's very important. And as conservative, we need to educate ourselves. What is Cultural Revolution? What is communism? And I urge all the immigrants from China or from the communist countries who love this country to speak up, to share your stories. And I also urge conservatives, seek them out, encourage them, give them support, ask them to share the stories. And we need to educate Americans. I give you a quick example. There is, outside this ballroom, there is a sculpture of Mao. Mao was a mass murderer. Can you imagine someone put Hitler's statue there or Stalin's statue there? Mao killed more people than Stalin and Hitler together. And we have a statue here in the public space because we don't know the history. We need to teach the history. We need to tell the story. Yesterday I heard a lot about telling story. This is an important story. We need to tell this story.
Absolutely, and the teachers these days really are rewriting history. Anybody who didn't see Glenn Beck's speech last night, it was excellent. We really do all need to know our history, and we need to preserve the documents that teach what really happened in our country.
So can I just give a quick example of one thing that we found when we did our open records requests? People said, oh, we're not teaching CRT, critical race theory. That word is nowhere found in the Cultural Competence Action Plan. And we did an open records request, and we got the slide deck for an administrative retreat where all of our principals and executive directors in our entire district were taught about white fragility, white supremacy, white identity, implicit bias, intersectionality. And on one of the slides, it asked all of our employees to identify characteristics of white culture. Okay? Now think about that for a minute. You may be familiar with the Smithsonian's website. They put up a website that talked about characteristics of white culture. Being on time, getting the right answer, working hard. Now, if that's not an insult to people who are not white, I don't know what is. But they said, that's not critical race theory. It is, because it has its origins in dividing people based on skin color. So just don't accept it when they say to you, critical race theory isn't in here. Look at what the roots of it are and understand it when you see it.
So that's very, very true. So for people who want to get more involved, there are recalls now. I know Ian's group is working somewhat with trying to recall school boards. I know Hannah just won an election to a school board. What else can parents do? I mean, are there school options? Are things changing? I know a lot of parents can't homeschool their kids. They're stuck with the school they have.
Well, I think the first thing that people need to do is they need to get involved. They need to go and learn what is going on. Go to school board meetings. Xi is here because she went to a school board meeting and she gave a great speech. We have these school board meetings every 2 weeks, and we plan these things where we're going to try and focus on a particular issue, and then somebody shows up and like they give a viral speech. I'm like, who's that? That's amazing. And it's really important to go there and challenge them. They won't listen to you, but they need to know that you're watching them. They need to know that you're sending FOIA requests. They need to know that you're digging in. I mean, you talk about critical race theory and how they deny it. We pulled from that $500,000 consultant their critical race theory training, and it said critical race theory training. It was on the invoice. Right. The former superintendent emailed somebody saying, yes, our social justice instruction and teacher trainings do align with critical race theory. It's all there. It's in the documents. You got to find it.
And Ian, so fightforOurSchools.com is coming out with some new programs. People can go to your website next week. You're launching some new programs, right? There's places where parents
that's
can
right.
learn.
FightForSchools.com. We're launching our new website next week. And I get a lot of people say, why Loudoun County? Well, I've got three things why Loudoun County. Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill. We are really ground zero right now. And if we didn't win those fights, there would be no Declaration of Independence, there would be no Yorktown, there would be no Constitution. So we're going to go win that fight there, and then we're going to take our army of Minute Moms, and we're going to go all across the country and fight these battles.
And
you
we
people,
are setting up
CPAC Nation, you guys are the army, so everybody needs to get involved. Please learn more about these three wonderful warriors, these people. This is dividing our country, it's hurting our children, and it's not going to stop.
So you can go to my website at hannahsmith4CISD.com to get in touch with me. We are starting a conservative school board coalition, so we'd love for all of the conservative school board members out there to join our coalition.
I just want to say that we are at war. It's a war between tyranny and liberty. It is life and death of this country as we know it.
And that's all that can be said. Thank this panel. They're really brave people.
Thank you again for joining us on the special edition of Reclaiming Our Schools and Protecting Our Children.
Yeah.
I think this is something that we so much care about. I know parents all across the country are speaking up and saying no more. But we also want you to keep tuning in. We're here Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and of course you can watch the show anytime on conservative.org. Tell your friends and family, and remember to follow us at CPAC, at mschlapp, at Mercedes Schlapp.
I have to say one thing.
Yes.
So Grandma in Wichita, Kansas went to a jewelry store yesterday to get something fixed.
Oh.
And the woman at the counter says, tell Matt and Mercy to keep doing the show.
Great.
I watch every show 3 times a week. So I know that the show is very meaningful at a time when people are having a lot of trouble finding out what's really going on in society.
But we are so inspired by people like Tanner Cross, who's speaking up and really saying we do need to love our children. We need to teach our children the truth and again, help save our children as well. So thank you all. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow.